Stuff actually has done a story today. Paula Penfold's investigating about is the CCP suppressing protest in New Zealand? And I thought it was interesting. So let's have a look at it.
The June visit to New Zealand of China's second most powerful person, Premier Li, attracted substantial welcoming parties and protesters highlighting the Chinese government's human rights abuses.
Now, you'll notice in this, I've been texting with Paula this evening, because you'll notice with this, I find it really interesting that all the faces are blurred. Now, at one stage, they identify the people, but even though they identify them, the faces remain blurred. And I said to myself, I wonder why. Because normally you blur faces to kind of protect the innocent, or if it's in a commercial setting for people who haven't agreed to be a part of that commercial video. But the pragmatists, is that the right word? I think it is. The pragmatists within this, I don't think that is the right word, who are in this video have their faces blurred. And I'll tell you at the end what Paula told me over text as to why.
And outside Auckland's Cordis Hotel, things turned ugly quickly. Two of the protesters were Michael Zhuang on the right and filming him, Jian Xing, who was knocked to the ground but recovered his phone and recorded what happened next. They laid complaints with police but couldn't get any traction, so Xing did his own investigation, matching frames from his video with pictures available online of who he thought they might be. To try to verify those he identified, we used facial recognition software.
It's specifically for images that are low quality. That's a match for that one. I would consider it a match, yes.
For both. So who are they? We asked Safeguard Defenders, a human rights NGO, to look into them.
The two people you asked us to look into present those characteristics of having affiliations, be it to United Front bodies, which is a CCP entity, but also to PRC officials, in particular the consulates and embassies.
Both have had various senior roles in United Front organisations, front bodies for the CCP, which engage in influence and interference activities.
So they're pretty official senior type people, but you see again the faces are all blurred. Now that's a minor part of it. I get a bit kind of focusing on one thing, but the story is much bigger than that. We'll keep it going.
Their task, if you will, to kind of crack down on dissent, to not only try to set narratives but also control and censor narratives that may be counter to what the CCP sees as its interests.
So what was the role of these two people in the alleged assault?
Yeah, they're saying stuff like keep beating him.
Kicking you?
Yeah.
One of those who appears to be kicking him, at least. The others we have yet to identify. But frame by frame, his involvement seems evident. And the other...
Stop!
This is her voice. Shouting, you can say whatever you want, but you can't trample on our national flag. You step on our flag, you deserve a beating. So do these connections change the significance of the Cordis incident?
I would say it does qualify such an incident as foreign interference when we look at the ties that these people do indeed have to, the CCP apparatus.
This how they treat the sovereignty of a free democratic country. Do we legit have an authoritarian state functioning here?
We have put written questions and tried visiting to ask about their apparent CCP links and the alleged assault.
No, he's not here.
He's not here?
I haven't seen him for weeks.
Weeks. Tried to call.
The person you have dialed can't take your call now.
All without success. Until we get an email saying she is not the woman whose voice is heard saying they deserve a beating. But the same woman in another video has what sounds like the same voice. Police had previously closed the case, saying there wasn't enough to investigate, but they've now reopened it on the basis of this new information. The Chinese embassy in Wellington did not respond to Stuff's questions, but the revelation of the apparent CCP links means there ought to be a whole lot more questions to come.
Yes, well, there you go. Paula Penfold, always legendary in her investigative journalism. Chewy, your thoughts, man?
Yeah, look, I think New Zealand has always had a very relaxed attitude to how some of the bigger powers, bigger global powers, would operate within our country. We've had issues with the US, China, Russia, Israel, and I think China's probably the most obvious one. Like I think Tane mentioned in the chat, he remembers being part of a protest to a Chinese delegation coming to New Zealand, where big buses were parked in front of protesters, so the delegates didn't get to see it.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the things that we really want to sort of sit there and go, well, if you want to interact with us, a free democratic country where people had the right to protest, that's kind of part of it. You have to see it, and it's very clear that there is enough apparatus here in New Zealand for the Chinese to come up with a crowd of very pro regime people to drown out the size of those flags. That's just not just a casual flag you have at home. that was a massive Chinese flag that they had, and a whole group of people. Like I just don't understand. Like, there's a lot of people that have obviously immigrated to New Zealand to get away from the Chinese Communist Party or their regime. I find it odd that there are people here that are very pro the Chinese Communist regime.
Yeah. So it's more likely that maybe they came with, but maybe on the flight, just one before or one after, so you can't quite connect them. So anyway, I asked about the blurry face, and it seems as though, without going into the deep details, is that the story was the bigger story was more important of than the individuals themselves. Identifying them enabled them to make the links to tell the story of foreign interference rather than just about them. I don't know. I wonder, as well, as if you're saying, I think this is that person, but you're not 100% sure, perhaps the blur is a legal thing as well, just in case. If they're telling the story of foreign interference, the big picture, then the little individual person who's doing that's not so important to out. So that seems, the last part was just my opinion, but the first part was talking about the bigger, Paula said it was about the bigger issue of foreign interference rather than the smaller issue of who was interfering.
I'm just going to highlight a comment here as well. It didn't make it through the filter. It's actually not too bad, but it just said, fuck PHN, China is not your enemy. In case you haven't noticed, it's the US and they're spreading the shit now. Now, I want to make a point here. Nobody's necessarily our enemy.
Yeah.
But also, by the flip side, using those two, China and the US, I'd also very clearly say that it's not a given that either of those two are our friend either.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, the US has done shit that is 100% in the US foreign policy. It's for their benefit, not ours. And that is always how these countries are going to operate. We are small potatoes. But when you're small potatoes, and they see you as such, they are quite happy to throw their weight around.
Yeah.
And here we are in the Pacific, and that is what we have. We will always be stuck within a power play between how the US and China want to interact. The US want us to be on their side, and they want Australia to be on their side, and they want Japan to be on their side, and that sort of thing. And China is trying to find their way around those sort of things. And they've spent a lot of money through their Belt and Road project in the South Pacific with smaller island nations and that sort of thing. We've spoken about that in the past. We have a massive trading relationship with China. And I think, so there we're always walking a line of like, they're not an ideal regime, but it's a lot of money to us. So we need to walk a line. We can't piss these guys off too much. And I think that the danger there is that we sort of look at things like a New Zealand citizen being assaulted and go, is this worth pissing off the Chinese?
Yeah.
A country that wouldn't even blink at going, okay, well, we don't buy your milk for 2 years.
Yeah.
We'll get it from somewhere else. And that would potentially devastate us. So we have to make those choices. And I think that's illustrated here where the police go, there's not enough to go on. These people go to the media. The media puts a little bit more pressure on, and the police go, maybe there is enough to go on. You had all of that information. You just didn't do anything with it. It took the media to do it. So yeah, it's interesting. We must never look at these big countries and go, they are our friends or they are our enemies. They are very much always operating in their best interests, not ours.
The thing about the government as well, which is very, very true, is how they have to tread carefully with the government. So much so that I had James Shaw on a podcast for another podcast I used to do, which I'll make it back to one day. And I just out of the block said to him, what do you think about the whole China-Taiwan thing? and he struggled. I've actually just got the clip up here, and I'm just seeing if I can find, it's like 7 minutes, I'm not going to play it, but find the bit where he actually had to, here it is here. Why not just play, see if we can find a little bit of it. Oh, look at me, I look like a bear. Good God. Hang on a sec. What about the question of what is Taiwan? What are they? How should we be considering them? Should we consider them, a part of China, separate from China, their own country? What do you say to that? His asshole is puckering as I ask that question.
Well, we would say that everybody on Earth has the right to self-determination. So that's not really a question for me. It's really for the people of Taiwan to determine for themselves. I mean, I'm not kind of remotely qualified to put words into their mouths. So that would be the stance that we would take.
So look, honestly, and I'm not trying to be a cheeky bastard here, but does that mean you can't really answer the question? Like you can't actually say they should be a country because of our relationship with China?
Well, I have responsibilities as a government minister. I have to kind of represent the views of the government, and especially when it comes to matters of foreign relations, right? So, there's that. But I guess my point is, I don't, putting my ministerial hat to one side for a second, I don't consider it, my, I don't think that I should take a view about whether Taiwan should or should not be a country. That's not for me to say.
Anyway, so even that, the Greens, dude, the Greens were like, well, what am I supposed to say to that? It's not, I don't really, but then you ask them about anything else in any other country, then it's like bad, good. But this one, it's like, yeah. So anyway, I'm sorry, James, if you're watching, I'm sorry. It was a dick move, but I knew what was going to happen, so I did it anyway.